Welcome to the TDX podcast. Something we've been working on for a little while. I put a little video out before talking you through what we'll be covering over the next few weeks. But this episode is with Richard Anderson, our head of debt sale and advisory. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the debt sale market at the moment. So, Richard, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself to the people.
Yeah, hi, Rich Anderson, Joe said, head of debt sale and advisory. At the risk of sounding boring, I've been in debt sale and advisory now since I joined 12 years ago. So started as a junior consultant in debt sale and advisory and now head up the team. So seen a few changes over those 12 years.
Thank you very much, Rich. So I've been working closely with Rich since I started working here. I don't know if a few of you who are on my LinkedIn, the economic update that I send periodically every quarter, Rich is the author of that. So a wealth of knowledge on what's going on in the wider economy and especially within debt sale is in Rich's bag. So we're just going to cover a little bit, a few questions regarding debt sale. So my first question, Rich, is just for the viewers' sake, if you could give us a little bit of information about how TDX originally got involved with debt sale and how you got involved yourself.
The debt sale industry isn't like it is now. I think it was just sort of in its inceptions and in its infancy in the UK. So bringing some kind of order and some rigor to the process, I think opened the door for TDX to become a central broker in the UK from that. So yeah, it was I think it was an interesting time. It's already, when I joined and came into the debt sale and advisory team, it had moved on a little bit from those, I'll call it Wild West days, but they weren't that bad.
Perfect. On to the next question. So how have you seen the TDX debt sale process change over those years? I know you say it's sort of like going from, inventing the wheel to driving a car now, what we see.
Yeah, inventing the wheel, yeah. It is. It's so when I started, it was a case of here's some debt and data. Can you try and cleanse it a little bit, and who are you going to sell it to? So it was almost like a very small panel, mainly the current tier one purchasers, and it was a sort of flimsy sale document that had probably about 3 or 4 pages, told you a bit about who was selling the debt and what was in the debt and things like that. And we did do some data cleansing work. And when I say data cleansing work, it's just like, making sure that what you're selling is what you're selling. And there wasn't any kind of high risk accounts in there. And that was the sort of basic offering. And we used to create competition through a 2-round auction process. Since then, it's moved on massively. That sales prospectus now is appreciated by the purchasers, because when they go to their remuneration, the investment committees, they say this is the debt, this is the company selling it, and they just plonk the prospectus on the table, and it's every bit of information you want to make a decision of whether you want to go and price and invest time in this deal is in that document. On the other side, the data side, we do a lot more work. It isn't just a cleanse exercise of washing it, making sure your vulnerables aren't in there, making sure your deceased aren't in there. We actually challenge that now. So we do a dry run due diligence with the seller, and we challenge everything. So we say, this looks like a settlement, prove it's not. This looks like you've closed the account for wrong, for vulnerability, or you've closed the account for deceased, but you're not saying it's deceased. Those kind of challenges. So it really prepares the seller for what they're going to expect in the purchaser due diligence.
So the benefits aren't just with, when TDX gets involved, it's not just with the person or the company that's selling the debt. We also add a lot of value to the purchasers as well.
Yeah, so the feedback we get from all the purchasers are all positive. They know the TDX process, they know what to expect. They know when we say a time and a date, we kind of almost stick to it to the exact second. Noon on a Wednesday means pricing has to be in noon on a Wednesday, that kind of thing. So the purchasers keep saying, this is great, Rich, we don't have to do all our own research, it's all there for us, it's a tidy book. And then they've got the confidence then to go through their own due diligence and have that rigor behind it without having to do a lot of legwork themselves. So it's almost like an accepted standard within the debt sales that we run, that this is what you're going to get, and exactly what you're going to get is a prospectus, a tidy file, and a timetable we stick quite strictly to.
So it's around 12 weeks that timeline is that the average?
It is. So for a first time seller, and that means nobody in the company's been through it before, we kind of set it at 12 weeks. Now there's some padding in that, so we've got 2 or 3 weeks at the end of the process between deciding who the successful purchaser is and finishing contracts. That tends to get done in a week, because during the process we should have been sort of negotiating some of the contract clauses and things like that, so we get to that stage of final bids, and it's almost like it's like dotting the I's and crossing the T's kind of thing, rather than negotiating specific clauses in a contract. So yeah, this padding in there, but it just makes sure that the seller's not tied to a timeline that they can't honor. And the reason why the seller's selling it is because they want the money in, and it's normally done because the finance want it in by a certain date. So if we can set that expectation for the seller's internal conversations, and we stick to it, and we make sure there's enough in there to be, if some things do go amiss or awry, we've got time to correct it and still hit that deadline. So that's why it's a 12-week. We've done sales that are between 8 and 10 weeks for sellers who've done it before. And then the fastest one we ever did was last year, when we did it in 4 weeks, 4 days, for a seller that did 3 sales a year, but they wanted one doing at half a year. And we only had like a month and a half to do it in. So we cracked that as well.
Nice. That's pretty quick. So in terms of just doing it by yourself in debt sale, what would those timelines be like? I know that it might differ from customer to customer, or from creditor to creditor. Do you have any idea of how long it would take without TDX's involvement?
So I think it can range, and it can be quite competitive. So I think if a seller has already established a relationship with a purchaser, and they're happy with what they're getting in terms of service, post-sale queries, resolutions, that kind of thing, and they're getting a reasonable price, and they think it's an acceptable price, then anywhere between sort of 6 and 8 weeks for just sending a book out or a debt portfolio out for sale. But then there's others that aren't like that. And if you're a first time to market, we've been talking to one over last year, and they had a timeline of trying to sell in October, and then we spoke to them in November, and they'd still not sold it, and then we talked to them in December, and they still not sold it. So if you're a first time seller and you haven't got an established relationship, it could rattle on for months, and it can be quite a daunting task if you haven't got anybody to hold your hand through the whole process.
Yeah, we worked on a debt sale recently, and I called the guy who was running it from their side up yesterday, and he was so thankful for our involvement. He said it took a lot of work from their side, but yours and Charlie's involvement really did make the whole process a lot easier for them.
Yeah, I mean, we just completed one that straddled the year end and everything, and the guy who's the main contact at the seller just said, "I couldn't have done this. I don't know how you do it as a job, but I couldn't have done it myself." So it
might be the same guy we're talking about.
It probably is, but it's nice to hear that, because it feels like we're adding value. Bringing a bit of order and a bit of structure to a sale that could. There's a lot
de-stressing it.
And there's a lot of money at stake as well. It might only be like 2 or 3 pence difference on a price, but if you're selling 25, 30 million face, it soon adds up. And if you're missing out on that, that's a lot of money to miss out on.
Absolutely. So I guess we can move on into the debt sale market as a whole. So since I started working at TDX, 10 months ago, I joined post-COVID. There was still a little bit of a COVID, buzz going on. Yeah, but it was sort of ending. And I know there was a lot of, collection had to halt. Debt collection had to halt during COVID. There was that breathing space. So I guess, how have you seen the debt sale market as a whole develop over that time? So start of COVID to now.
Well, if I can take you back a bit further, We did some work. So we've analysed the regular sellers that we've gone through from 2015 through to now, including the COVID break you're talking about, and pre-COVID, between 2015 and I think 2020 is when COVID really hit, isn't it? We kind of saw the prices peaking around 2017, and then we knew it was turning to a purchaser market. And when I say a purchaser market, is the prices were beginning to cool a little bit, not massively, but the prices were beginning to cool. Then COVID hit. So COVID was almost like a double whammy from each side. Like you say, the creditors or the sellers had forbearance to think about, how to treat their customers that are now vulnerable. You know, everybody was in lockdown, collections ceased for a period of time. So they weren't happy to sell their debt. And then on the other side, we heard of a few purchasers that had pulled out of deals. So they were, they were ready to sign a deal and they've gone, oh no, for whatever reason, they've pulled out of that deal. So it was almost during that COVID lockdown, the 3 lockdowns we had, the market paused. I'd say seized up, but it actually paused. And then what we've seen when we've come out of that is there was almost like an unfettered demand by the purchasers for books, and the prices have shot up 2.5, 3-fold from what we saw pre-COVID.
So is that from like new investment, or is that just because of the pause they'd sort of built up?
I think it's
what they would have spent.
I think it's a bit of both. I think there was the demand to get the books in, to get get the whole system working again and getting them collecting on the debt and that, but also what we class as the tier 2 levels have been well funded, so they were creating competition and driving prices up. So I think you got a 2-fold effect of demand outstripping immediate supply. So everybody's scrabbling to get a book purchased, but also there was more players in the market that were more well funded. And I literally had a conversation with a bank here, and they experienced exactly the same thing. They've got their own panel and they do their own sales, but they were sort of reiterating back to me exactly what we'd seen as across the whole market as what they were seeing in their micro sales as well. So yeah, they saw unfettered demand immediately, and now they've seen prices slightly cooling a little bit, and the purchasers being a bit more selective about the debt they're purchasing and things like that. So there's sort of a reflection that sort of validates what we've been seeing as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess that leads me nicely onto the last the next question even. So where do you expect the debt sale market to go? I know it's quite a hard ask to give it, but you've got your finger on the pulse with that sort of thing. So
yeah, I guess there's three. I think of it as 3 aspects. One is the purchaser landscape. So we've seen 2 of the big purchases, one acquire the other one, and this 6 has become 5 as a big tier 1 purchasers. I can't see that happening again for a few years. So I think the sort of acquisition piece is quietening down. We've seen the old tier 2s being well funded and different sorts of funding, so not just loan notes and things like that. They've been quite innovative in how they've been funded, so they've become a lot more competitive. They've got quite aggressive targets over the next 2 to 3 years, and they want to be competitive in the auctions that we run. And then the third aspect is the second aspect is foreign investment. So we've got a few inquiries of investors, which are slightly different to purchasers. So purchasers here in the UK tend to have a capability to be able to collect the debt themselves, whereas a foreign investor will buy the debt but doesn't have the capability within the UK to collect, so we'll outsource that to a DCA, or they may come to TDX and do the recoveries management piece on it and things like that. So we're seeing a few inquiries from foreign investors saying, what kind of books have you got for sale? Can we be involved in the process? We haven't got an FCA license, but we are connected to a FCA licensed organization that will collect that debt, kind of thing. So that's the second aspect. And the third aspect is the creditors bringing the debt books to market. During COVID, I think they've built up a warehouse, bigger warehouses. So we're seeing slightly higher face value books being brought to market, but we're also seeing new markets. So we're seeing a little bit more activity in IVA sales, and we're seeing new markets like auto finance and that kind of sector beginning to venture into the debt sale market. And it isn't just a dipping their toe in, they're actually becoming serious players where they want to either sell regular spot sales or they want to sort of try and arrange forward flows for the next 2 to 3 years.
So within auto finance, is it just something that has not been done as much before? I know there's been debt sales we've done in the past for auto finance, but is it just something that they weren't aware that they could do, or what do you think about that?
I think the amount of warehouse debt, when I say warehouse debt, that's their end of collections and recovery strategies. I think COVID's triggered their thought process and said, right, we've got 30, 40 million sat here. We're not collecting on it. It's just degenerating in value. What can we do? And, you know, the ones that are savvy have got in early because they realize, you know, purchasers are also interested in exploring new markets and seeing what sort of margins they can make on and everything like that. So I think it's, getting a little bit more savvy and realizing that they can sell debt. You know, some have been surprised, you know, saying, oh, I thought it was just banks and big utilities that sold, and it's not. There are a lot of markets that the purchasers want to get into.
So purchasers, so if you've got this warehouse debt that's losing value as time goes on, so do purchasers collect on that for a longer period of time in a better way than you could do internally?
Yes, that's exactly right, Joe. So if you were a creditor, say providing, I don't know, telephone services, you terminate the debt, you default it, and then you kind of you've got a collections and recoveries process that might last 365 days, maybe a year and a half. And then if it hasn't collected or connected or anything like that, you're not going to throw your money trying to liquidate it anymore. A purchaser buys that at so many, 6-7 pence in the pound or whatever it is, but they've got a 10 to 12 to 15 year liquidation cycle. So they might not break into that account for 2 or 3 years, but they've still got another 10 years of possible collections activity they're on. And they've got different tools. So if I was a major, energy supplier, if it got out that I was offering settlements to my older debt of, say, you know, pay me 50% and I'll write the rest off, that would get on all the forums and everybody would be like, well, wait till they make me a settlement offering. I'll pay me debt, don't get defaulted, doesn't affect my credit rating kind of thing. Whereas purchasers can offer that because then they've changed the name. It's not the major energy supplier or the telco supplier or the bank. It's the purchasers themselves that are collecting on it. And then they can say to their customers now, we realise you owe £100. We'd accept £40, or we'd accept a payment plan over 7 years, or, you know, that kind of thing, which can't be offered by the creditor. So that's where they have the advantage against any sort of normal creditor, because they've got the longer time sales to sort of liquidate that debt.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So you can protect your brand image as well by
correct, yeah. But okay, you need the right purchaser as well. So the due diligence session I talked about is not just the purchaser asking loads of questions of the seller. It's the seller's chance to see what the purchaser is like, so that you can align your values. You can ask the purchaser how they're going to treat your customers, and you can align your values with that of your prospective purchaser. So you might sacrifice, you know, 1.5 pence in the pound because that purchase, say, come in at 3rd place, but you really like the way they operate, and that's more aligned to how you want your customers to be treated. So you take a little bit of a hit on the price, but you know your customers are going to be treated the way you want them to be treated.
And I guess that fits in with, you know, consumer duty and fair customer outcomes. I feel like a few of the debt sale conversations I've been sitting in on, values are becoming more and more important. You know, it's just, you know, I remember one conversation we were having where they were saying if they received a high bid, but the second bid was more in line with their values, they would probably go with the second highest bid, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, but you know, purchasers that it's not a bad thing to be a purchaser. You know, they've got their own brands and reputations to look after, and they have to, because they're FCA licensed, they have to adhere to consumer duty as well. So, you know, there's a minimum standard that's acceptable, but even within that, there's different ways of collecting and different ways of contacting the customer, and that's where your alignment to your values and your company as a seller, you need to look into a bit with the purchase. Don't sell for the highest price, because that might not be the right outcome for you.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Perfect. So last question,
Yeah.
and this is a little bit more for. So I've received a few inbound emails from people from businesses that are looking to sell debt, and TDX operates in the £1 million and above sort of brokerage service. So if you were a small business wanting to sell a little bit of debt, what would you do? What would the first steps? Where would you go look?
Well, I'm bound to say it on. You come to TDX. We have a full view of the purchases in the UK market. We can do an intro. We did it with a small insurance company. They had a face of about 1 million to sell, so not massive. It tends to rule out some of the bigger purchases because they have minimum spends. They spend a lot of time on it, and if it's not a big spend, they don't kind of want to venture into that kind of market. But there are other purchasers out there that will look at that and spend 10p, 8 pence in the pound or whatever, means it's 80, 100 grand your cash you get, which is important to that business selling. But we can put you in contact with the right, and we wouldn't do a full brokerage service. We do an introduction service, and we prep the seller on some of the questions they should be asking and things like that. So we kind of spend a bit of time with that seller to say, these are the things you'd be looking for, these are the things you should be asking. And by the way, we've seen these 3 purchasers that are interested in your kind of debt. We can set up a phone call, the initial phone call, and then you take it from there, kind of thing. So yeah, it's a range of services. Full brokerage is for the bigger debts, because we don't want to take a big chunk of the sale proceeds. If it's getting towards 10% of the sale proceeds, it doesn't go round. It's not a good experience for the seller. It makes us look a bit like, I'd say, a bit money grabbing, and we're not. We want to do a fair service for a fair price. So we tend to concentrate on the, a rough 5-6 million and above face value. If it's less than that, we can still introduce people and help the seller liquidate their debt for the best outcome for them.
So I guess this is a bit more of a yes or no answer to the question, but so just having TDX's involvement at any size debt sale, can it provide you an uplift?
Yes, I would say that, but I think so. We wouldn't just pick, if you're talking about the smaller end of the debt sale where the intros are, we would go and talk to some of the purchasers, but we wouldn't recommend somebody who's going to, not that interested in it. So we will put forward 3 competitive purchases, and that competition will drive up. If you just went to one of them, they might offer you like 4 or 5p in the pound as a direct sale. You might think, oh, that's great, I've got 50-60 grand on my £1 million face. But actually, a bit of competition and you get 8 pence, it does make a difference. So just bringing those 3 competitive purchases to that seller will drive up a price. I'm absolutely convinced.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Perfect. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of this video, Rich. I appreciate you jumping on.
I haven't bored you to death then.
No, you're the face of TDX in my opinion. So yeah, so I really do appreciate you jumping on this first call. The next one, I would like to look at involving a few members of your team to go into a little bit more of the detail on debt sales, so people can learn a little bit more about the day-to-day processes behind it. I know Charlie and Rich, the other Rich, would be the ones who would be on those videos. So we're looking forward to learning a little bit more about that from them. Just a little shout out to the watchers as well. If you have any questions for Rich, I'll drop his LinkedIn or email address below, and mine as well, in case you have any inquiries or you want questions to be asked in the next video as well. So thank you, Rich, again, and thank you for watching, and have a great day. Cheers.